Hey, I'm Hannah. Sometimes in my spare time, I like to edit the Twilight book. So that's what we're doing today. I have 2 other videos where I edited earlier parts of this chapter. This chapter is 90 miles long, but we're getting through it. If this video makes you mad because you're like, oh, I'm so mad, I love Twilight. What does this girl know? I'm a writer, and I have 2 books available on Amazon and some other places. I'll link them in the description. One is called Little Birds, and one is called Starlight. So go buy those and read them and decide I'm an awful writer, and then come cite the things I've done wrong in a comment on this video. That'll get me.
Hey, Editing Hannah here. Where is the camera? I don't know. But you can catch me here tomorrow, so Friday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. We're doing a live Q&A and we're going to draw another winner from the giveaway. It might be you if you've entered. If you haven't, all you have to do to enter is pre-order Starlight in any form from any place you can find it, and then fill out the form that's linked in the description. And if you don't win, you'll be entered into every giveaway until you do, or until it ends on October 11th. Every person who enters the giveaway is going to win a bundle of 3 short stories that I cut from Starlight, in addition to being included for the drawings for other prizes like signed books and posters and a writer's kit and manuscript critiques, etc. Good luck to you Friday.
Let's get into it. Okay, so the last thing we saw was Bella, I corrected. Everyone within a 3-seat radius turned to look at me. Where's your next class? He asked. I had to check in my bag. Had to check in my bag for what? I'm just gonna take that out. Government with Jefferson. The way that they have these commas, it feels like just little snippies. I'm gonna take out N. Government with Jefferson, Building 6. Feels better to me. There was nowhere to look without meeting curious eyes. I'm headed toward Building 4. I could show you the way. That's a comma splice. Definitely over-helpful. I'm Eric, he added. I smiled tentatively. Thanks. We got our jackets and headed out into the rain. She does this a lot where she just puts too many words. Headed into the rain. Why is it gonna be out into the rain? Like, yeah, you're not heading inside and then into the rain. Anyway, which had picked up. I mean, it was drizzling earlier, right? So the fact that she's saying rain kind of... I could have sworn several people behind us were walking close enough to eavesdrop. I hoped I wasn't getting paranoid. So, this is a lot different than Phoenix, huh? He asked. Very. It doesn't rain much there, does it? 3 or 4 times a year. Wow, what must that be like? Why is he talking like that? Wow, what's that like? He wondered. Sonny, I told him. You don't look very tan. My mother is part albino. He studied my face apprehensively, and I sighed. It looked like clouds and a sense of humor didn't mix. Okay. Stephanie Meyer does this thing. I read all the Twilight books years ago for my college thesis. And anytime there's any semblance of a joke, she has to acknowledge that a joke has been made. And it kills me. There's one part, I don't remember if it's in Twilight or in one of the later books, that genuinely made me laugh out loud because it was clever. And then she spent like the rest of the page talking about how funny it was. And I was like, well, now it's not funny, dog. A few months of this and I'd forget how to use sarcasm. Well, bud, we're 12 pages in and you just did it for the first time. We walked back around the cafeteria to the south buildings by the gym. Eric walked me right to the door, though it was clearly marked. I'm going to put brought because that's more of like a Eric's bringing her, and because we already said walked in that paragraph. Check out back. Well, good luck, he said as I touched the handle. Maybe we'll have some other classes together. He sounded hopeful. I smiled at him vaguely and went inside. What does that mean? What about I smiled small? And again, that word went. Can't stand it. Ducked inside. It's raining. She would have ducked, maybe. The rest of the morning passed in about the same fashion. My trigonometry teacher, Mr. Varner, who I would have hated anyway just because of the subject he taught. I thought she was super smart. She was just bragging about how smart she is. Was the only one who made me stand in front of the class and introduce myself. I stammered, blushed, and tripped over my own boots on the way to my seat. That's so much. I'm just going to say I tripped over my boots on the way to my seat. After 2 classes, I started to recognize several of the faces in each class. Literally the word class twice in one sentence. recognize several faces. There was always someone braver than the others who would introduce themselves and ask me questions about how I was liking forks. I tried to be diplomatic, but mostly I just lied a lot. At least I never needed the map. I'm going to take out a lot, but I mostly just lied. Okay, this doesn't make sense to me, but I'm not going to fix it. There was always someone braver than the others who would introduce themselves. Is it a different person every time? She's recognizing faces. Is it just the same person introducing themselves over and over again? I don't like that. Doesn't make sense. Okay. One girl sat next to me in both Trig and Spanish, and she walked with me to the cafeteria for lunch. We are really walking to and past and around this cafeteria, aren't we? She was tiny, several inches shorter than my 5 feet 4 inches. I don't even need inches than my 5 foot 4. 5 feet 4. If we just put 5'4". But her wildly curly dark hair made up a lot of the difference between our heights. How fucking curly is her hair? I couldn't remember her name, so I smiled and nodded as she prattled about teachers and classes. I didn't try to keep up. We sat at the end of a full table with several of her friends, who she introduced to me. Shouldn't that be whom? I don't care. I forgot all their names as soon as she spoke them. Bella really talks some shit about how smart she is for her to not know trigonometry and also forget names immediately. They seemed impressed by her bravery in speaking to me. The boy from English, Eric, waved at me from across the room. It was there, sitting in the lunchroom, trying to make conversation with 7 curious strangers, that I first saw them. I like this scene in the movie when there's just like one of them's holding a banana and then there's like a single carrot stick on the table. Is that this scene? They were sitting in the corner of the cafeteria as far away from where I sat as possible in the long room. Why don't we just say the farthest table from me? There were 5 of them. They weren't talking and they weren't eating, though they each had a tray of untouched food in front of them. They weren't gawking at me, unlike most of the students, so it was safe to stare at them without fear of meeting an excessively interested pair of eyes. Why do we need to have so many words? But it was none of these things that caught, and held, my attention. They didn't look anything alike. Why would they? I'm going to take that out just because I don't like it. Of the 3 boys, one was big, muscled like a serious weightlifter with dark curly hair. That's my boy Emmett. Another was taller, leaner, but still muscular and honey blonde. That's our Confederate. The last was lanky, less bulky, with untidy bronze-colored hair. There's our love interest. He was more boyish than the others, who looked like they could be in college or even teachers here rather than students. The girls were opposites. The tall one was statuesque. She had a beautiful figure, the kind you saw on the cover of the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. Just say she got titties, Bella. What you scared of? The kind that made every girl around her take a hit on her self-esteem just by being in the same room. You know what I'm going to do? The kind that made every girl around her gawk. It's gay now. What are you going to do? Her hair was golden, gently waving to the middle of her back. The short girl was pixie-like, thin in the extreme with small features. Her hair was a deep black, cropped short, and pointing in every direction. And yet, they were all exactly alike. Every one of them was chalky pale. I think I'm going to take that out, too. Like, why do we have to be told something we're about to be shown in horrific detail? Every one of them was chalky pale, the palest of all the students living in this sunless town, paler than me, the albino. Once again, I'm not a sensitivity reader. Do we call people albino who aren't albino? Let me know. They all had very dark eyes, despite the range in hair tones. They also had dark shadows under those eyes, purplish, bruise-like shadows, as if they were all suffering from a sleepless night or almost done recovering from a broken nose. You broke his nose? Though their noses, all their features, were straight, perfect, angular. I can't stand her prose. Sorry, Stephanie. But all this is not why I couldn't look away. I stared because their faces, so different, so similar, were all devastatingly, inhumanly beautiful. I think I'm gonna take that out. I stared because their faces, so different, so similar, were all devastatingly... I'm gonna take so different, so similar out because who cares? All devastatingly, inhumanly beautiful. Especially Rosalie. If she knew her name already, I'd add that. There were faces you never expected to see, except perhaps on the airbrush pages of a fashion magazine, or painted by an old master as the face of an angel. Okay. It was hard to decide who was the most beautiful. Maybe the perfect blonde girl, it's her, or the bronze-haired boy. Don't lie, it's Rosalie. They were all looking away from each other, away from the other students, away from anything in particular, as far as I could tell. Shut up! As I watched, the small girl rose with her tray, unopened soda, unbitten apple. It's the apple, guys. It's the apple. It's the apple in the Garden of Eden. And walked away with a quick, graceful lope that belonged on a runway. I don't know if I would ever describe a runway model as having a lope. I watched, amazed at her lithe dancer's steps, till she dumped her tray and glided through the back door, faster than I would have thought possible. My eyes darted back to the others, who sat unchanging. Who are they? I asked the girl from my Spanish class, whose name I'd forgotten. Why is Bella such a dick? As she looked up to see who I meant, though already knowing, probably, from my tone, suddenly he looked at her, the thinner one, the boyish one, the youngest, perhaps. Christ. He looked at my neighbor for just a fraction of a second, then his dark eyes flickered to mine. What about, as she looked up to see who I meant, his eyes snapped to her. The thinner boy. Maybe the youngest. He looked at her. No, he's already looking at her. Just gonna say his dark eyes flickered to mine. But flicked because it's like quicker. The thinner boy, maybe the youngest. I'm gonna put that so it's not a fragment. Now it's simply a comma splice. He looked away quickly, more quickly than I could, though in a flush of embarrassment I dropped my eyes at once. They're so fast. In that brief flash of a glance, his face held nothing of interest. It was as if she had called his name and he'd looked up in involuntary response, already having decided not to answer. My neighbor giggled in embarrassment, looking at the table like I did. Why not just she? That's Edward and Emmett Cullen, and Rosalie and Jasper Hale. The one who left was Alice Cullen. They all lived together with Dr. Cullen and his wife. She said this under her breath. I glanced sideways at the beautiful boy, who was looking at his tray now, picking a bagel to pieces with long, pale fingers. His mouth was moving very quickly, his perfect lips barely opening. The other three still looked away, and yet I felt he was speaking quietly to them. That's just strange, unpopular names, I thought. The kinds of names grandparents had, but maybe that was in vogue here. Small town names? I finally remembered that my neighbor was called Jessica. Is that Anna Kendrick's character? I love Anna Kendrick. A perfectly common name. There were 2 girls named Jessica in my history class back home. They are... ... Very nice looking. I struggled with a conspicuous understatement. Yes, Jessica agreed with another giggle. They're all together, though. Emmett and Rosalie and Jasper and Alice, I mean. And they live together. Her voice held all the shock and condemnation of the small town, I thought critically. But if I was being honest, I had to admit that even in Phoenix it would cause gossip. Which ones are the Cullens, I asked? They don't look related. Oh, they're not. The Hales are brother and sister, twins, the Blondes. They're in their... What the f***? And their foster children. The Hales are the blonde brother and sister. Twins. The Hales are the blonde brother and sister, twins, and their foster children. They look a little old for foster children. They're in high school. They are now. Jasper and Rosalie are both 18, but they've been with Mrs. Cullen since they were 8. She's their aunt or something like that. That's really kind of nice. Why do we have really and kind of? Those are contrary. That's really nice for them to take care of all those kids like that when they're so young and everything. I guess so, Jessica admitted reluctantly, and I got the impression that she didn't like the doctor and his wife for some reason. With the glances she was throwing at their adopted children, I would presume the reason was jealousy. I think that Mrs. Cullen can't have kids, though. Why does she have the word any there? She added, as if that lessened their kindness. Throughout all this conversation, my eyes flickered again and again to the table where the strange family sat. They continued to look at the walls and not eat. Have they always lived in Forks? I asked. Surely I would have noticed them on one of my summers here. No, she said in a voice that implied it should be obvious, even to a new arrival, like me. They just moved down 2 years ago from somewhere in Alaska. I felt a surge of pity and relief. Pity because, as beautiful as they were outsiders, clearly not accepted. Relief that I wasn't the only newcomer here, and certainly not the most interesting by any standard. I'm so bored. As I examined them, the youngest, one of the Cullens... How does she know he's the youngest? Okay, if she can see that he's looking up at her, we already know that she's looking at him. So I'll just say the youngest looking one. If he's meeting her gaze, yes, he's looking up. The youngest looking one met my gaze again, this time with evident curiosity in its expression. As I looked swiftly away, how many times are they going to look at each other and look away quickly? Can we do something? Can something else happen? As I looked swiftly away, it seemed to me that his glance held some kind of unmet expectation. What does that mean? It means that he can read minds, but he can't read yours. Belle's not this perceptive. I'm just going to take that out. Which one is the boy with the reddish-brown hair? I asked. I peeked at him from the corner of my eye, and he was still staring at me, but not gawking like the other students had today. He had a slightly frustrated expression. I looked down. That's Edward. He's gorgeous, of course, but don't waste your time. He doesn't date. Apparently, none of the girls here are good-looking enough for him. She sniffed, a clear case of sour grapes. I wondered when he'd turned her down. Stephanie, just say you hate girls. Say it. You did with the book series, I suppose. But not Bella. Bella's special. She's not like other girls. I bit my lip to hide my smile, then I glanced at him. His face was turned away, but I thought his cheek appeared lifted, as if he were smiling too. Why not just, but I thought he was smiling? But I thought I saw him smile. After a few more minutes, the four of them left the table together. They all were noticeably graceful. And take out all. They were noticeably graceful, even the big brawny one. It was unsettling to watch. Why would it be unsettling to watch? Stop. Maybe he's an athlete. That's how athletes are. The one named Edward didn't look at me again. Why not just say Edward? I sat at the table with Jessica and her friends longer than I would have if I'd been sitting alone. I was anxious not to be late for class on my first day. One of my new acquaintances, who considerately reminded me that her name was Angela, had biology 2 with me the next hour. We walked to class together in silence. She was shy too. Why do we have to go through her whole day? Her whole boring day. Can something else happen? When we entered the classroom, Angela went to sit at a blacktop lab table, just like the ones I was used to. She already had a neighbor. In fact, all the tables were filled but one. Next to the center aisle, I recognized Edward Cullen by his unusual hair, sitting next to that single open seat. Oh my God. As I walked down the aisle, is that foreshadowing? To introduce myself to the teacher and get my slip signed, I was watching him surreptitiously. I'm going to take all that out. I walked down as I walked down the aisle to introduce myself to the teacher and get my slip signed, he suddenly went rigid in his seat. Or just Edward went rigid. We already know he's sitting. He stared at me again, meeting my eyes with the strangest expression on his face. It was hostile, furious. I looked away quickly, shocked, going red again. I don't mind, my face flushing or heat rising or something because that's something you can feel. I don't like just going red because she's not looking at herself. Flushing hot again. Why not? I stumbled over a book in the walkway and had to catch myself on the edge of a table. The girl sitting there giggled. They're girlfriends now. I've noticed that his eyes were black, Coal black. I can't do this anymore. That's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to my patrons for all of their support and for sponsoring this video and all of the videos that I make. Here's some of their names, all of their names, in fact. If you like this video, give it a like. If you want to comment, you can. There will be some angry 14-year-olds who might yell at you about it, but that comes with the territory, doesn't it? See you next week. Bye.